I'm Pawn, a late diagnosed autistic human being from France living in the UK. I make videos about my own experience as a late diagnosed autistic person, and today I want to talk about this stereotype that autistic people are perfect little pure angels, the representation of innocence and you know, and naivety. The reason why I wanted to make this video is because I've been hearing a lot about that lately, and it bothers me. Lately, I've been stumbling upon lots of things, either in books or in subreddits or in YouTube videos. I've been hearing this a lot, which is, oh, autistic people are so naive and they're so pure and innocent, and actually autistic people don't have it in them. They don't have it what's needed to be like narcissistic or manipulative, because they don't have the social skills, you know, so they can't help being, you know, pure angels, and they have such a strong sense of right and wrong and justice that they're so like, I legit like read something from a guy on Reddit that said this autistic person did this bad thing. It's hard to believe that an autistic person could do such a thing, and I'm like, really? Aren't we like people, you know, complex human beings? And even like in the book that I read, it was actually quite a good book. It's like a French graphic novel. You can tell already like I have a lot of things to say about this. It's a really good book, but at the end there's like a guide to autism. It was written back in 2016, and in France at the time Asperger's was still a thing. It was a thing until 2018, so it took a while. France is very late when it comes to autism and neurodivergence. The book was like giving such a stereotypical representation of autism at the end that made my skin crawl, and I was like, why did you, like, the graphic novel was good, why did you have to add this thing at the end that just messed it all up? And it was saying things like autistic people are incapable of lying and are very naive, and that just, I was like, okay, I'm gonna make a video about this because that just pisses me off. And then I was rewatching Dr. Romani's video on autism versus narcissism, and the conclusion every time is no, autistic people cannot be narcissistic because they don't have the social skills or they're too pure. By the way, like, I really like Dr. Romani, and that video in particular that she made was one of the reasons that I ended up getting my autism diagnosis. But I have to say, she clearly knows very little about autism and keeps saying that she knows one person in her life living with autism with a very, you know, depressed look on her face, like it's some kind of disgusting disease. So she's not like an expert in autism, and she doesn't have like first-hand experience of what it's like being autistic. I consider myself to be someone who has a strong sense of right and wrong, who has a strong sense of justice, and I really struggle with lying. Does not mean that I do not have the social skills required to manipulate people, and that I'm incapable of lying to people. No. People, and it's the kind of stereotypes I heard from my own family growing up as well. Autistic people are so pure and kind. It's like people don't acknowledge that autistic people are just like, you know, they're people as well, and they're complex human beings with individuality, personality, upbringing. And also it denies the existence of autistic masking, because what is autistic masking if not the ability to learn certain skills, imitate people in order to appear neurotypical and hide your autism? Like, basically it implies that we are incapable of learning skills, which isn't true. They might not be within us when we're born. They might not develop in the way they do in other people, neurotypical people, but it doesn't mean we can't learn those. And like, otherwise they're you know, autistic masking wouldn't be a thing. So I've been really angry these past few days at this idea that you're this pure, innocent little angel who's like incapable of hurting others, and if they do hurt someone, they didn't mean it. It's just because they have no social skills, and that pisses me off, and I'll tell you why. I know from experience, and I've heard other people talk about it as well. Dana Anderson, for one. I don't want to speak for her, like, go watch her videos, they're great, but autistic people can be narcissistic. I don't know where that idea comes from, that we, like, don't have the skills to manipulate people. Like, my own father, he is autistic. I know it because I was diagnosed autistic, and he has all of the traits, okay? He has a lot of the traits I have. When he was younger, he was accused of not doing the right facial expressions. People would often ask if he was okay because when he was smiling, he looked like he was in pain. He's always had really strong special interests and would tell me as a kid, like, when you like someone, you become passionate about it and it's the only thing that mattered to you, etc. He dropped out of school when he was around 14, 15, and like basically taught himself everything he knows, and he doesn't really have friends. He spends a lot of time on his own, engaging in his special interests. He has comorbidities like addictions, and he's a very anxious person. He has stims. He's constantly humming and like wringing his hands. He has sensory sensitivities, some of the same ones I have. For example, we both can't stand like the feeling of wet hair on our skin. He hates crowds and busy, noisy environments. He doesn't like to socialize for very long. I could go on. That's not everything, but he is like autistic as hell, okay? And guess what? He's also a horrible person. I talked about it in many videos in the past. He's racist, okay? He is sexist, you know, misogynistic, if you will. He is homophobic. He is transphobic. He is whatever you can think of that ends in phobic, basically. He's abusive as well. He used to hit me when I was a kid, and then when I confronted him about it later on in life, he either pretended it never happened or blamed it on me, or, you know, found any justifications he could to not take accountability for his actions, and would get absolutely enraged. He's extremely selfish. Like I said, he basically assumes that my mom is like his maid and that she's supposed to make food and clean the house, do everything. He has never really been financially independent. I mean, kind of, but he has had very low wages, which I'm not judging, okay? I'm autistic, I'm unemployed. I know it can be hard, but what little money he made, he always kept to himself to spend on his own, you know, special interests, his horses, his woodwork, and his gambling addiction. Like, I could go on about all the ways in which he is an asshole. And to be honest, he has a lot of narcissistic traits. He has, a disproportionate sense of self. He sometimes talks about himself in the third person, and he becomes enraged whenever he feels like people are implying that he has weaknesses. He will say like, oh, I'm open to have a discussion, I'm open, you can talk to me. He lures you in, and then you open yourself up, you become vulnerable, and then he kind of like doesn't react in the moment, and then 3 days later, once he has processed everything, delayed processing, also an autistic trait, he comes back to you and absolutely like projectile vomits all his rage onto you, and how he did nothing wrong, you're the one to blame, you're a fucking asshole shit of a person. And then if you dare walk away, he's like attacking you further, and like he can even become like physically violent, which he was throughout my childhood and my teenage years. That's the kind of person he is. Does that make him less autistic? No. Does that mean he has like narcissistic traits, possibly is a narcissist? Yeah, it's very likely. More, I would say, on the covert side of things. Obviously you can't diagnose people. I'm not saying like I know better and like I'm a specialist. Like, I don't know if he's a narcissist. I'm not saying like you can diagnose other people. What I'm saying is it's wrong to assume that autistic people cannot be narcissists. And I'm not the only one who's had similar experiences. Like I said, Dana mentioned in her videos on multiple occasions how her own family members and one of her partners were abusive, and frankly, from the way she described them, possibly narcissistic, and they were autistic as well. So it makes me angry to hear that we don't have what it takes to be narcissistic, and that, you know, perpetuates this idea that we're naive little angels, and it excuses a lot of behaviors as well. Because if you start, you know, excusing everything that an autistic person does as like, oh no, but they didn't mean it, you know, they just have no social skills, so they don't know when they're hurting people, and then going, you know, they couldn't possibly have any ill intentions because they're autistic, you know. My dad, from what I've heard him say about his upbringing and what I've heard other people say about, you know, his relationship with his mother and stuff, I have very strong suspicions that he was raised as the golden child, the typical golden child that you hear of. Nothing he does is possibly wrong. All his bad behaviors are being excused. He is like the king of his own house. And even when he married my mom later in life, because both of them had already been married before, when he married my mom, his mother, so my grandmother, told my mother that he was like a king and he had to be treated like one. So if that's not a freaking red flag for narcissism, I don't know what it is. The fact that he's autistic has nothing to do with the fact that he was raised as a golden child and basically raised to become a narcissist. Like, basically reducing a whole identity to your neurotype and like nothing else matters. But no, that's not how it works, you know? Let's just not forget that autistic people are people. We're complex human beings. We're influenced by our upbringing, by our own individualities, by our environments, our life experiences, and to just make, you know, very vague statements about how you have, you know, narcissistic people on one hand and then autistic people on the other hand, and they cannot be both at the same time. It's just like, oh, I don't know. So anyway, that's all I wanted to say. It's a bit of a mess. It's a bit of a word vomit, but I don't know if I made any sense. I just wanted to bring my own little nuance to the discussion. Let me know in the comments what you think about this. Do you know any narcissistic, autistic people around you in your life? Thank you for subscribing, commenting, liking, and, you know, watching this video. I have a Ko-fi page linked down below in case you'd like to support my channel monetarily, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye!